Learning English with English faculties.
Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. Today, we're mastering the OET criteria for writing a highly effective referral letter. Look, if you're gearing up for the occupational English test, you probably already know this. Your biggest enemy isn't actually the English language itself, it's the ticking clock. You really need to understand not just what to write, but exactly how to structure your clinical thoughts when you're under immense pressure. So, let's get right into it.
Our roadmap for today is super straightforward. We'll start with the 45-minute exam strategy, move on to reading the case notes, break down the four-part letter structure, apply that structure to a case, and finally look at catching common errors.
All right, Section 1, the 45-minute exam strategy, or as I like to call it, beating the clock.
Okay, tackling this strict testing window is arguably the absolute biggest hurdle for healthcare professionals taking this exam. You have exactly 45 minutes for the whole shebang. And your secret weapon here? It's the 5-35-5 time management strategy. Here's how it works. Those first 5 minutes are strictly mandatory reading time. Literally, you're not permitted to even pick up your pen. Then, you have 35 highly focused minutes to actually draft your letter. That leaves exactly 5 crucial minutes at the very end to review it. Sticking religiously to this breakdown is your ultimate safety net when that exam pressure hits.
Moving right along to Section 2, reading the case notes and flipping the script.
You know, during those first 5 minutes of mandatory reading time, human nature strongly tempts us to just start reading those dense case notes right from the very top. Don't do it. Actually, flip the script entirely and check the absolute bottom first. Why? Because you need to identify your recipient and the requested action. Once you know exactly who you're writing to, step 2 is clinical empathy. Put yourself in that specific specialist's shoes. Doing this lets you smoothly jump right into step 3, which is ruthlessly filtering the remaining notes. You just skim them from top to bottom, pulling out only the clinical information that actually matters to them.
That brings us perfectly to Section 3, the 4-part letter structure. It's a highly reliable framework.
So once your 35 minutes of writing time begins, you absolutely need a blueprint. Now, the OET explicitly states they don't want a robotic, memorized template for every single exam. But having a reliable guide completely prevents panic. Naturally organizing your letter into these 4 components, purpose, timeline, background, and recommendations, provides just incredible clarity for the reader. And more importantly, it gives your brain a solid, dependable foundation to rely on. It frees up your mental bandwidth so you can focus on the actual medical English. Let's talk about the purpose paragraph, because it's your most powerful tool. Your opening should immediately introduce the patient and clearly state what you need the reader to do. Here's why this is a real game changer. Under the post-August 2019 criteria, being absolutely explicit in your purpose directly secures you 3 specific marks right out of the gate. 3 marks. So do not bury the lead. Put your reason for writing front and center so the specialist knows exactly what they are dealing with from sentence 1.
Next up is the timeline paragraph. Your logical flow here depends entirely on clinical urgency. If it's an emergency referral, well, it makes complete sense to start from today's presentation. You highlight the immediate, critical vital signs first, and then work backwards to fill in the context. Make sense? But for standard, non-emergency referrals, you want to rely on chronological history. Start from the very beginning of the patient's symptoms and naturally build that clinical narrative forward to the present day.
Let's see this in action in Section 4, applying the structure. We'll look at the case of Miss Hassan.
All right, let's see how all of this builds together by applying our structure to a fictional, non-emergency case study. We have a 29-year-old patient named Miss Hassan. Following our reading strategy, what do? We completely ignore the top of the page and jump right to the bottom. Immediately, our task is crystal clear. We're requesting an endocrinologist help to investigate and manage potential hyperthyroidism. Boom! We have our purpose locked in, so now we can go back up and skim the rest of the file.
Putting ourselves in the endocrinologist's shoes, we mercilessly filter that background history. We completely exclude a past family road traffic accident and a historical appendectomy. Let's be real, an endocrinologist simply does not care about a 10-year-old fender bender when dealing with a thyroid issue. But we absolutely must keep the vital details: a maternal grandmother with diabetes, a latex allergy, which, as we know, must always be noted medically, over-the-counter vitamin D, and crucially, her desire to start a family.
Because this is a non-emergency referral, we structure Miss Hassan's timeline chronologically. Day 1 begins pretty mildly, poor sleep, dry eyes, and a 2-kilogram weight loss. But by day 15, the symptoms really escalate. She has proptosis, an elevated heart rate, and a highly concerning TSH level of 9.3. Building that escalating tension brings us perfectly to the present day.
noting we are still awaiting the 24-hour ECG results. Finally, we round the whole thing out with our recommendations paragraph. It explicitly states what the endocrinologist must do next. Notice how we cleverly integrated her background desire to start a family right into the final action plan by asking for advice on the implications for fertility. This right here demonstrates incredibly strong medical reasoning and creates a really seamless, logical flow between your paragraphs.
All right, almost to the finish line. Section 5. Catching common errors in those final 5 minutes.
You are now in the final leg of that 5-35-5 strategy. Listen to me carefully here. Do not overthink this. And definitely do not attempt massive, panic-induced rewrites in these final moments. Doing that almost always introduces more errors than it fixes. Instead, simply use a mental checklist to eliminate the basic grammatical errors that literally all of us make under the immense pressure of an exam. Check your spelling against your known personal weaknesses. Review your articles. Are you correctly identifying countable versus uncountable nouns? Ensure your prepositions use correct medical phrasing. And very importantly, double-check that your tenses remain perfectly consistent throughout the patient's timeline. Look, if you're completely unsure about a word, don't agonize over it. Just move on.
I want you to remember this fundamental truth from our source material. The 4-part structure is not a rigid rule. It's a flexible tool. The entire OET exam is designed to serve your professional clinical judgment. If the background history is the single most vital piece of the puzzle for a specific case, go ahead and move it before the timeline. The ultimate goal is always clarity for the recipient, not blind adherence to some generic template.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as you prepare for test day. Are you just listing facts to pass an English test? Or are you truly communicating as a peer to the specialist on the receiving end? By stepping into their shoes and adopting this structured, empathetic approach, you're not just going to beat that 45-minute clock, you're going to draft a highly effective medical document. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay focused, trust your clinical judgment, and keep learning. You totally got this.